Note to self when making a recording, make sure to not bump the mute button on the microphone by accident, because when you get to the end, you'll realize you have no audio. So this is part of a series of discussions around how you can make more robust and reliable, how you can be more successful in your business process or technical system by looking at the possible failure modes and planning ahead for those, either by building those failure modes out of the new process or system or coming up with some type of remediation, detection and remediation, so that you know your system is actually functioning as expected. So when we design a new system, we get a bunch of happy path requirements, right? Hey, when A happens, when somebody signs up, we're going to send them a welcome message and a coupon, okay? But it's possible that that sign-up process can fail, or that we won't know they signed up, or the coupon we send them is invalid, or we don't send them a coupon, blah, 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 right? So the idea is, if we can identify what the possible failure modes, we can decide what the risk we have of those, and we can decide how we're going to mitigate those or treat those, right? So we want to discover what failures can occur and how we can detect those failures and then remediate them. So the main thing I've got here is this table at the bottom is basically what we're going to want to fill out, right? We're going to make a list of the faults. So the diagram at the top is a 4-stage business workflow with 3 transitions. It's got 3 teams. Team A does something, they hand off to Team B, Team 2 hands off to Team 3, and Team 3 sends an acknowledgement back to Team 1 that the whole thing is done, right? So in this case, what we're going to do is we are going to attempt to identify faults in all 4 action boxes and all 3 of the transitions between those boxes. So for transitions, you can decide whether you want to model this as an outbound on the action that it's leaving and an inbound on the action that's receiving. So is transition 2 actually something we should model, or should transition 2 actually be on the back half of 1 and something else on the front half of 3? I'm going to treat it as a transition here, but it may depend on your business problem. So the idea is I want to find out what the fault is. So team 1, they are going to try and start a program. That means they got to create a startup document. They got to get it approved so that they can then hand off to team 2 so they can do costing. So what are the faults? Well, one of the faults is not getting approval is not, getting denied is not a fault. That's part of the business process. Never submitting for approval and not be understanding what happened. Not getting action taken within a reasonable amount of time. So we came up with a program and we put it out there for approval and it didn't get approved. It didn't get denied, but it didn't get approved. So we need some way to know that like the time limit has expired on the approval process. That's then going to get handed off to team B, where they're going to like build the product definition or the marketing plan or whatever it is. And that transition to that team could have a failure, right? We might never leave our department. We forgot to send it. Our system that talks to their system doesn't have communication and nobody noticed that they're not talking. Team 3 might not have accepted it. They may have some acceptance process that didn't get invoked. And then how would we detect this, that it didn't get there? Well, team 1 might have a timer that says they expect to get an answer back within 4 days, but that means in 4 days, they'll have some alert that comes up and says, hey, we haven't gotten an answer yet. It may be that the transition handler between 1 and 3, transition number 2, actually has some kind of alert on it, some kind of process, a checklist that's created by some team. There's a human in the back somewhere who runs a bunch of checks to make sure all the 1 to 2 handoffs occurred, that marketing picked up everything from product planning, or the system B picked it up from system A. And then the remediation. So remediation can either be, and I don't really talk about this, but the idea is remediation is we've identified we had a problem. What do we want to do about it? In some cases, we're just going to ignore it. I was thinking of one earlier for a website. Amazon, when you're trying to delete your history, that only works like half the time for me. And it either works in blocks or it doesn't work at all. So what I detect is, I'm trying to delete my browser history, and I detected it didn't delete it because it's still there on the screen. What's the remediation? Amazon may have decided when deleting browser shopping history from Amazon store that a human's just going to remediate it by clicking the button again. So remediation might be manual. Maybe in this case, team 1 sends another message to team 3, or they reinitialize the process and it reboots the handoff to team 2. So remediation. So that's kind of what I'm walking through the table on the right a little bit. Capture the process information, all the steps and transitions. Decide if you're going to model the transitions as step components or if they're going to be transition standalone. Brainstorm the possible failure modes in each one of these boxes and arrows. And that list can be pretty long. Actually, I worked on a system, we had like 5 boxes. We ended up with 40 possible failure modes because we just brainstormed them all. And some of them we decide were so rare it didn't matter, or they weren't severe enough. Then we determine, we find the faults. And there are 2 kinds of faults in my mind. There are faults by action and faults by inaction. A fault by action is they placed an order and it got in wrong. We somehow need to sync up team 1 and team 2 to make sure that what got placed and what was handled was actually the same thing. Another one is a fault by inaction. Team 3 never replies. They couldn't have done anything wrong. None of the proactive, hey, does the orders line up with the plan? None of those will work, right? Because they just didn't order. So we need to figure out, do we need proactive detection, or is we going to have to manually detect this? And then the remediation can either be automated or manual, right? Some systems fix themselves. We resend for 2 days and we redo this, or it fixes itself. We have a default value. It can come back and pick it up from us. It's not as efficient, but it works. So we want to capture the process steps. We want to brainstorm on the failures. We want to find faults that happen due to action taken or no action taken. We want to look at the detection, proactive detection and manual detection. And then we figure out what the remediation is. The final area, what we use mostly for prioritization. And that's severity and rarity. And I'm pretty sure Six Sigma calls this something else, and I don't know what it is. The idea is, how severe is this failure? How catastrophic? It may be that it's a temporary delay, like my browser selling history delete thing, and they decided it's not very severe, so it's not worth putting any time on to fix that. But it might be pretty common, so it could annoy a bunch of people. But maybe it's not that common, so it might be severity and risk. You have other columns here that people do. And like I said, Sigma's probably got a bunch of other columns. So what we tend to do is use severity and rarity somehow in a product to decide in a high, medium, low fashion which of these we want to work on first. And the things that are hard to detect when there's a failure, or maybe they need a manual remediation and it's expensive. I worked one place and we had to fix data every time something occurred, and it cost us about 4 hours to fix the data. So that was super expensive. It was like $200, well, $100 every time we had to fix one of these. By the time you took into account the triage, the talking to the customer, and what we needed to do to fix it. In some cases, that cost was partially buried, so we just went with manual remediation. So that's it. The goal here is to make a more stable system, more robust business process by understanding where it's not going to be robust, or where the sharp edges are on this thing that can cut something. So draw up your process. Make a list of all the pieces of it. Identify the faults in each category. Figure out if it's possible, easy, or hard to detect those. Some cases, you're going to manually remediate, but you're going to have to make it easier to detect. And then figure out what the remediation is going to be. At the end of that, you'll have some idea how stable this new process or system is. You may decide to hide from it, or you may decide to fix it, but at least you'll have information to work on. And that's sort of the justification behind doing fault mode analysis in a new business process or system. Have a great day.